Good afternoon, competitors, coaches, judges, and honored guests. Welcome to the CaseIT 2025 Finals presentations. My name is Ramiz and I'll be your timer today. As a reminder, the CaseIT Organizing Committee is filming the presentations. It is my pleasure to now introduce our judging panel. We have Amrit Brar, Director of BTS Business Management Office from TransLink. We have Kurt Pregler, Chief Information Officer from TransLink, Brendan McCabe, Director of Enterprise Commercial Business of the Pacific West from Microsoft, Jerry Ackerman, President and Chair of the CIO Association of Canada, and Tino Finodi, Director of Customer Success at Microsoft. It is also my pleasure to introduce to you our judging facilitators. We have CK Kaligotla from Simon Fraser University and JM Go, also from Simon Fraser University. We are so excited for your presentations, but before we begin, we would like to remind the competitors of a few presentation guidelines. You will have exactly 15 minutes of protected time to present your solution. At the conclusion of your presentation, the judges will have 10 minutes to ask questions. At the end of these periods, competitors and judges are not permitted to continue speaking, even if the time ends while they are in mid-sentence. An iPad will be used to time the presentations and the Q&A period. You will be responsible for keeping track of your own time. Please note that competitors are not permitted to reveal their university, country, or city of origin during or after the presentation. And as a gentle reminder for those in the audience, please remember to silence your phones. Thank you and all the best. Competitors, you may now begin your presentation whenever you are ready.
For the past 25 years, TransLink has acted as the lifeblood of Metro Vancouver, powering billions upon billions of user journeys. But as the city grows and demand starts to outstrip our capabilities, it's time to start looking at innovative solutions to help us stay ahead of the curve. I want you to imagine a world where our buses, trains, and ferries can spot delays before they happen. Our repairs and maintenance teams can fix issues before they arise, and most importantly, our riders can get from point A to point B seamlessly without delays. This is a future that's possible with digital twinning technology, where your raw data is transformed into live, actionable insights to build a future-facing, resilient service provider. Hello, TransLink team. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Dennis, and I'm joined by Ali, Theo, and Willem on behalf of Edge Consulting. Can we pause just to make it? On behalf of Edge Consulting. Today we'll be laying out a strategic roadmap for TransLink to become a future-proof, resilient organization that can best serve Vancouverites through a few key technology enablers. So today, before we begin, let's talk about what digital twinning is, as it's one of the key technologies we'll be discussing most in depth. Digital twinning takes one of your assets, whether it be your transportation vehicles or stations, and creates a digital replica that can be interacted with in place of working on a real asset. Now, there are three key layers when it comes to digital twinning, but the most important one that we're most concerned with is the data layer. It's important that we have quality data that we're feeding into our digital twinning models, and there are two key prerequisite factors I want to point out. Data must be relevant and timely, up to date, but secondly, it must be in a unified format, free of data silos, and usable for our digital twinning model. And today, Edge Consulting will be helping you answer two key questions. Is digital twinning something that's beneficial to TransLink? And secondly, is it something that we have the capabilities to implement at this time? So that gives us our problem statement for the executive summary, and I'll walk you through our analysis. We found three key gaps in implementing digital twinning, and the most prevalent one is the funding gap. As we know, TransLink currently faces an operating deficit around $600 million a year, but on top of this, we see that our data doesn't quite meet those requirements that I've set out earlier. We have data delay and data fragmentation issues in the 9 key data sources that we work with. Now, our recommendation is to roll out 3 key technologies to circumvent these issues: edge computing, data fabric, and digital twinning over 3 key phases. Now, edge computing and data fabric set the stage for digital twinning. However, these technologies also provide value to TransLink on their own, which we'll cover. But back to the funding gap. How would we fund such a capital-intensive project when we're operating at a deficit? To this end, we've outlined several key funding partners that can provide grants or low-interest loans to fund this sort of project. And the overall impact you can see is a significant decrease in data delay when we implement edge computing, and also a significant reduction in key costs like maintenance costs, as well as energy consumption when we implement digital twinning fully. And you might be asking yourselves, why are we implementing this technology now? As we can see, Vancouver is growing at a rapid pace. We've seen ridership surge to pre-pandemic levels, and with 90,000 residents added to the city every year, it's important that TransLink is able to keep up with this growth when we're not expanding our fleet. And to this end, we have three key considerations and constraints that we've considered. Firstly, as I mentioned, financial sustainability is always at the forefront of our minds. Ridership experience is core to everything that we do and all the decisions we make. And finally, you have a couple of key ESG goals that you want to be conscious of. As we can see from this quote from the CEO, Vancouver is growing rapidly and we need to find a way to be able to grow in tandem. So you might be asking yourselves, why would we take on such a capital-intensive project when we're facing that large deficit? Well, if we cross-reference the value areas that digital twinning unlocks for us, we can actually see that these correlate directly with those three key objectives you have. So predictive maintenance, data monetization, these tie into financial sustainability. Operational efficiency smooths out the ridership experience, and the sustainability impact of digital twinning simulations can help you meet your ESG goals on time by that 2050 mark. But don't just take our word for it, let's look at some real-world cases.
With that being said, we wanted to highlight some real-world case studies that actually show real-world tangible impact. So looking at the transportation sector, we highlighted Singapore and Shanghai. In both of these cases, they were able to monitor traffic conditions better, infrastructure health, but most importantly, they're also able to enable predictive and preventive maintenance. Now, the impact and benefits highlighted in those two case studies also carries over to other sectors, such as city planning and urban infrastructure. So on the case study for Toronto and York region, we can see that although they are based in Ontario, Canada, they were also able to see a huge decrease in maintenance costs, but also respectively 50% for maintenance costs, but also extended asset lifetime. Now, this is a little bit of more of a local example, the Vancouver International Airport. After implementing the technology, they were able to streamline operation facets, not just for the airport, but also benefiting the consumers itself and cutting down unplanned maintenance by up to 30%.
So now we've outlined that digital twinning is something that TransLink can derive value from. But the second question we were brought in today to answer is TransLink equipped to even take on this sort of project? And if not, what are the key gaps and roadblocks stopping us from doing so, and how can we reasonably overcome them? Obviously, the most important one that we want to highlight is the funding gap. As it's a very capital-intensive project, how can we secure alternative sources of funding to set up this project? But secondly, as I mentioned those two key prerequisite factors for data before, they have to be relevant and timely, and they have to be in a unified format. This brings into concern the 9 key data types that we use, where they face the data delay and data fragmentation issues. For the interest of now, let's focus on the data delay and data fragmentation issues before jumping to the most larger issue of the funding gap. So Theo, how can we clean our data?
Now TransLink, we've outlined 9 of your key data sources in this chart over here, and we've also mapped the processes and the issues they're currently facing. The two we'd like to focus on today is data fragmentation and also data delays. However, the one key thing I'd like to highlight is that only one of them is equipped for digital twins currently. With this, let's take a step back and really understand why data delays happen. Currently, how TransLink currently operates their data is that buses go back to their depots, and that's when they batch process their data. This results in over 32 hours of late data, and this actually results and contributes to the 80 million in extra operating expenses year over year. What this means is that TransLink does not have real-time data or real-time information to make those predictive analytics and also make sure that the maintenance and have slow insights. All this actually contributes when there's an 11% decrease in satisfaction ratings for consumers. Now, this is where edge computing comes into play. And I'd like to highlight edge computing in 3 main steps. First, it's closer to the source. We're directly implementing edge computing directly onto buses and TransLink itself to make sure data is processed real time. This reduces lag and then also shortens the real time. And we make sure TransLink is smarter, faster, and stronger with this. We resolved the 32-hour data issue into a mere 2 minutes. Now we resolved 6 of the 9 key data questions. However, all that's left is the data fragmentation. Now I'd like to highlight 2 key stats on this graph. Over 80% of organizations see data silos as the main barrier. And for this explicitly on TransLink, data volumes double every 12 to 18 months. If TransLink doesn't do anything about this, they're not able to sustain and be mobile transporting Vancouverians across Vancouver. This is where data fabrics come into play. How data fabrics work is it utilizes a virtualization layer to make sure all data is processed in a fabric, making it have a unified view. And the key benefits of this is laying the foundation and also scalability. Now with this, we're able to have two key main impacts. First, enabled advanced use case. This, we're able to support digital twin modeling, AI predictions, and new revenue streams. And the second thing we'd like to highlight is reduced overhead, with over 15 to 20% cuts in overhead fees. Next, let's take a look at data fragmentation, and finally, we're able to solve all the key asks, as well as break down the data silos. And as we highlighted, we're able to have a unified view of all the data and have a bird's eye view over all this as well. Now, as you remember, to implement digital twinning, we have two key things: relevant and up-to-date data, and unified and usable data. With the introduction of this model, we're able to not only have real-time data, but also have data fabrication that unifies all this information into paving the way for a smooth digital twin rollout. Now, the key question here is that we've given you the implementation, but how are you going to fund this?
So let's revisit the biggest roadblock for digital twin technology: money. Translink needs a lot of capital upfront to fuel their edge computing and data fabric solution. Given their own funding gap of $600 million per year, where would they find the resources to fuel a digital twin overhaul? We've identified these three untapped funding partners that have a history of funding innovative transit solutions. The Canada Infrastructure Bank, for instance, approved $1.28 billion for a Montreal light rail system. Using quotes like these, we estimated expected values of funding and scenarios for lower and higher levels expected. As a contingency for lower levels of funding, Translink can always issue bonds, as it has done in the past. These bonds are oversubscribed and well-rated and can generate up to $300 million a year. So with that, we've addressed all three major hurdles for digital twin technology implementation. Now let's dive into the costs for this project. First, we looked at real-world examples that use the technology referenced. By referencing these projects and scaling them to Translink's needs, we estimate yearly ongoing costs of $5 million per year. This was calculated using an Azure pricing model that accounts for the computing power needed for day-to-day operations. Next, there's a $400 million upfront cost that accounts for implementation, consulting, and personnel training. $20 million of this will be for hardware purchases, such as sensors and data servers. So, Willem, with all this capital invested, what are the benefits Translink can expect?
Thank you, Ali. So we highlighted the cost of the implementation, but what about the cost savings? So we outlined a 10-year projection of the cost savings year over year, but in 2028, the cost savings starts there due to the pilot phase. The pilot phase will start in 2028 and will be included within the implementation timeline, which we'll touch on shortly. Now, the other key highlight I want to shift your attention towards is by 2030, there will already be $343 billion in cost savings, which is already 85% of the overall implementation plan. Now, by 2035, we expect $1.23 billion in total savings, which is roughly 207.5% in ROI. On the right-hand side, we have a simple chart of visualization to showcase rail and bus operations with and without the cost savings. Although for the rail operations, we can only see a small decrease in cost savings, you can actually see that on the rail side, there is a substantial decrease. Now, overall, we can see that there's 7.5 cost savings overall over the across 10 years from implementing edge computing, data fabrication, and digital twin. Now, as I mentioned earlier about the implementation timeline, this will be segmented into three specific phases. Phase 1 will be for the development of digital, ensuring that we are ready to roll out digital twin, for example, edge computing and data fabrication. Phase 2 would be taking all of that together and setting out the foundation for digital twin through a pilot. And Phase 3, the most important part, actually doing a full rollout of digital twin. Now, there are some must-win battles as highlighted in the top-hand side, which is securing the funding, data governance, ensuring that the workers right now are actually ready to capitalize upon that technology, and lastly, integrating legacy systems for compatibility. Now, with this huge implementation project comes risk and mitigations. Now, I'd like to highlight the most important risk on here, which is regulatory barriers. The reason why for this is that anytime data is involved, there is strict regulations that must be followed in accordance. Now, the mitigation for this is that, but also ensuring that there's privacy, quality, and accessibility being followed. With that being said, here are some key performance indicators, not only ensure accountability, but success going forwards. These KPIs have been segmented within the phases outlined within the implementation timeline, but also the ones most important is in phase 3, as mentioned. The two most important KPIs would be the compliance to the reference models, as mentioned, but also ensuring that there is an actual reduction in operating costs, ensuring that there is a tangible ROI.
So as we've covered quite a bit these past 15 minutes, let's rehash. You brought us in to develop a phased and resource efficient to digital twinning, provided that we explain the use case of doing so. And in doing so, we found 3 key barriers: the funding gap, data delay, and data fragmentation. Data fragmentation and data delay have been solved with implementation of edge computing and data fabric, and simultaneously this opens the door for digital twinning rollout. However, there was still that main issue of the funding gap, which we solved through the key funding partners we've outlined. Finally, with the full rollout across 3 phases, we aim to have digital twins rolled out by 2031. Now again, I want you to step into the future and picture the TransLink of tomorrow, where buses, ferries, and rail operations are integrated in a seamless system, reducing delays, reducing downtime, increasing our sustainability metrics, and overall creating a seamless transit experience for Vancouverites. Thank you, TransLink team, for joining us today, and we're so excited to help you build the TransLink of tomorrow. We'd love to answer any questions you might have had about our processes, our findings, or our recommendations.
The $400 million investment, can you break down the cost of that?
Yeah, for sure. So the $400 million is, a lot of it is implementation costs. So what this means is you're bringing in subject matter experts who have the know-how to help you lay this out. So it's a lot of consulting work, but also a lot of training your staff to be adaptable to these new technologies. Some subset of it is the hardware costs we're incurring, but it's only $20 million. So we've laid out all the relevant costs that subsidize up the $400 million. So it should be application and service integration, the testing phase, also project management costs, and you can see a large subset of it is the consulting fees that we will incur, as we might not have the know-how in-house to build out a project of this scale. And if we were trying to do it in-house, you might even incur more costs than we've outlined.
What was the source of those estimates? How did you source those estimates?
Yep, I could take this question on. So Dennis, could you please go to the appendix slide? So we've researched a lot of key stakes and also a lot of relevant case studies comparing these project sizes. And we've actually outlined 4 of them here today. And we've mostly touched upon the Singapore's model. And what this means is that because it's such a large scale and we're implementing 3 key technologies, edge computing, data fabrics, and also digital twins, it's mostly closer to this figure, as well as adding up the previous case studies we've done as well.
Thank you. When you went over the information on the data sources being batch and moving to real time, I'm curious if you spent much energy thinking about which data sources are the most important ones to get to real time for the outcomes that we're looking for. Was it everything, or is there some of that nice to have and these critical areas that are more important?
Yep, I could take this question on as well. The key things we'd like to highlight in our model and what we'd like to prioritize is APC data and also sensor data as well. So these data are key metrics in order to make sure we're able to predict system failures and predict these delays. So we focus on shifting these data qualities first into edge computing, and after that we're able to focus on secondary data such as the ones we've listed above.
Almost $500 million is a lot of money to spend up front before we get to any of the KPIs that relate to outcomes. How did you think about that? How did you think about the potential, I'm going to say likelihood of cost overruns, given that a lot of that spending is humans trying to do their best on a big job?
I can actually take on that question. So, as mentioned, it is a very capital-intensive project, but one of the key, risks that we also outlined here is project delays and kind of scope creep. The kind of respective mitigation for that is ensuring that we are on time with deadlines. And let's say it is a very, I guess it ties back into the implementation timeline. We're not rolling it out fully. We're not using that $400 million off the bat. We are implementing a pilot, making sure that we are satisfied with with the performance, and ensuring that we're not using that 400 million at the end of the day straight off the bat, but making sure we are doing it in a phased approach.
I guess just to follow up, maybe just go slightly deeper, right? The activities are nice, the outcomes are critical. And so when we think about that, and if I understood the measures, the KPIs, it's phase 3 before we know if we're actually going to start seeing operational improvements, the cost savings, et cetera. So just how did you factor that into those early stages?
Yeah, for sure. So we can actually see efficiency changes and also operational efficiency cuts as early on as phase 1. Phase 1 is edge computing, and when we introduce edge computing, we're reducing the delays in getting that real-time information. And TransLink can massively benefit from that. And Dennis, could you please go to our recommendation slide? We've outlined 3 key studies shown from Gartner, as well as some few other industry players that actually outline the main benefits of implementing edge computing.
Simultaneously, something I also want to highlight is the cost. So when we were doing the cost, we used the discount rate as a long-term borrowing rate, provided that this is the most conservative estimate. In the case that you would need to issue bonds to raise the capital, if we looked at our other funding sources, all of these would, with the exclusion of the CIB, all of these are just grant money, and the CIB is a very low interest rate, lower than your cost of capital for borrowing if you're to do bonds. So it's only from 1% up to a maximum of 3%.
Put any thought to considering what technology is already on the bus and what you could already make use of in order to start proving your case out?
Yeah, for sure. So we've taken a look at 9 of the key data presented to us in TransLink, and what we've found to notice is that APCs as well as sensors are mostly already available on TransLink transportation. And in order to take that one step above, we're introducing edge computing to really make sure that data is sent real time. The key issue here is that data is delayed by over 32 hours, but when we introduce edge computing, we change that to 2 minutes.
I would actually like to highlight a thing here. When we look at the current state of, I don't really bring up the appendix, but when we look at the current state, SkyTrain already has digital twin technology integrated. However, the current state of that is that due to lack of data availability and how fast that data can really be communicated and actual insights because of that, we can actually see that due to the current state, it is already implemented on SkyTrains, but there is a gap that we must fulfill. We basically already have something that can be used very well, but we just lack the capabilities to actually utilize it effectively, and I guess 100% of it.
So, sort of further what Brendan was asking around sort of proving concepts and you know, sort of upfront cost benefit, quick wins. Was there any consideration given to sort of sub-phases within the phase approach? So for example, you shared some bus versus rail data and the cost benefit was a bit different there. Was any thought given to that in terms of how to get started?
We actually took a look at edge computing softwares, and the main edge computing we chose to implement was the Dell EdgeGate 53000. So we can actually phase this approach from, instead of adding that computer, that edge device into every single TransLink bus, we can implement that into hubs. So once the TransLink train or bus goes back to its station, that's when it gets implemented real time. So instead of that 32-hour delay, it now changes to 8 hours a day, adding to that phased approach.
Thank you.
In your research of the case studies, was there kind of higher value use cases that you would recommend specifically for TransLink?
Yes, let me just scroll to it on the appendix. Yeah, so one key thing that we highlighted was that there's also the opportunity to increase your safety and emergency metrics for TransLink. So in the case that you have incidents, you can simulate these on digital twins and really have a better response to these sort of incidents. And secondly, sustainability modeling. I know we did highlight it in the main deck, but it wasn't really so much the focus and so much as operational cost cutting was, right? So with sustainability modeling, you can kind of see the carbon footprint that your assets are emitting, and if you're on time with that 2050 goal, with the projections that you will have in the digital twin model. I would say those are the two most important ones.
what do you think is going to be the biggest challenge based on the approach for implementing? What are the major challenges you see?
So one of the major issues is that implementing that data fabric, as TransLink currently has a lot of data silos. And as we know, data silos actually contribute 30% of analysts' time. And in order to really implement data fabrics and also edge computing, we first have to address that key issue of allocating and identifying those data silos, and how do we take that data out and implementing. And with this, we've decided to partner with Microsoft Azure, as they have a proven track record to implementing these projects, and we've done a brief alternative analysis on that as well.
So it's not that 2 Microsoft people are entering that.
10 out of 10. Did you think at all about pouring $400 million into just more buses?
I believe adding more buses to an already congested Vancouver would just be addressing the symptom, not the cause. So using digital twin technology to really revamp and address the congestion by anticipating it and seeing where buses are needed at different frequencies, this ensures long-term success. There are also some use cases where this digital twin technology can be used for all of Vancouver, just as the Singapore Land Authority did for their project. So not only would this project benefit TransLink, it would benefit Vancouver as a whole, leading to less congestion and faster travel times.
Thank you to our competitors for your presentation and to our judges for your questions.